All right, folks, welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. Interesting sidebar here, and we're going to talk to Congressman Ted Poe about his call for an investigation into the non-proliferation treaty. And he says that the Russians may be in violation, and he wants a closer look at that. But talking about Russia, this is interesting. Living here in New York and growing up in Brooklyn, and living in Brooklyn for the first 40 years of my life. I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan, only because I despise the Knicks, so it's natural for me to be a Brooklyn Nets fan. So I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan. My son's a huge Brooklyn Nets fan. He wears the jersey, the whole thing. He's 14. And now I read this. A Russian billionaire who owns the New Jersey Nets, Mikhail Prokhorov, has said that he plans to relocate his company that runs the Nets to Russia, in keeping with the Kremlin's call on Russian businessmen to repatriate their assets to help combat new U.S. sanctions. Now, I'm confused because I was of the belief that Prokhorov once ran against Putin, and I just always had the impression that he was kind of anti-Putin. Maybe I'm wrong. Now, the United States and European Union, have imposed sanctions. Now, according to the NBA, this would not violate any bylaws of the NBA. Now, he has said before, Prokhorov, that he planned to relocate the company that runs his NBA team to Russia, but this does underline support for Putin. Now, I got to tell you something. If this guy is in support of Putin, then I think we need to reevaluate a whole bunch of stuff. I need to reevaluate who I'm a fan of, along with my son. And, I brought this up once before in passing. Way back when I did sports talk at WABC Radio, I started a group. This was in the 80s, called POSES, P-O-S-E-S. It actually got a box in USA Today. People opposed to Soviets entering sports. In other words, that's when the Soviet athletes first started coming into the NBA and the NHL on certain teams. And my objection was, we're paying their salaries. I mean, by going to watch them at the game, say that Team X in the NBA signs a Soviet player. Well, Team X is paying that Soviet player. Where do you think most of that money was going to? To the player? No, he'd have to pay most of it to the Soviet government, who we were still in the Cold War with. So I had a big objection to that. Now, if the owner of the New Jersey Nets, Mikhail Prokhorov, is now deciding that he wants to openly show support for Vladimir Putin, well, then maybe I got a problem with that. I think maybe we should all have a problem with that. And I don't see how the NBA could say it doesn't have a problem with that. We'll put that question to Congressman Ted Poe, who joins us now, Chairman of the House Subcommittee on Terrorism and Non-Proliferation. Hello, Congressman.
Hi, Steve.
How are you?
I'm excellent.
Before we get to I don't want to throw you a curveball here, but before we get to your topic of conversation, which of course does involve Putin and the Russians and their compliance or non-compliance with established treaties, the owner of the New Jersey Nets, who had in the past, I thought, was an opponent of Vladimir Putin. It's Mikhail Prokhorov. He's a billionaire, and he says he's going to repatriate his business, which owns the Nets, to Russia in order to help combat the sanctions against Russia, as Putin has called for Russian businessmen to do. Now, the NBA says there really is no problem with this, but I don't know. As a Nets fan, I got to think twice if this guy's showing open support for Putin. No?
Well, I agree with you. I think anything that we do in the United States to show support for Putin shows support for his aggression and invasion of other countries, whether it's the Republic of Georgia or the Ukraine, the Crimea. So I think I don't think that's a wise decision.
Yeah, he. By the way, he ran against Putin in the 2012 presidential election, which we know how fair that was. But he has since underlined his loyalty to Putin. This is a story by Reuters. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that, because I don't think that's a very good thing. Now, Congressman, one of the reasons you've joined us is you're looking for the GAO to look at the State Department failure to report the Russian nuclear missile treaty violations. Explain.
There's a 1987 treaty that we have with the Russians. It's the INF Treaty, Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. We signed it. The Russians signed it. Apparently, it appears that the Russians have been cheating.
I'm shocked.
and lying. Meanwhile, the United States has not. We have fulfilled our obligation to reduce intermediate nuclear weapons. And it seems that the United States has known for some time that the Russians have been cheating, but the rest of the country, other than the State Department and administration, didn't bother to tell anyone about it. And so we are asking the administration why they have been talking about, why they haven't told us about this until after the so-called reset policy, focusing not on Russia but on the Asia area. And after, more importantly, why did the administration wait to tell the Senate this during the ratification of the New START Treaty in 2010? We knew that they were cheating before that. Administration knew, but they didn't bother to tell the Senate. Why? Well, maybe the Senate wouldn't have approved the New START Treaty in 2010 if they'd known that the Russians were already cheating on a treaty from 1987.
And this is all, in your view, to protect the so-called reset with Russia, as you see it?
Yes, it was to protect the reset, and it's also to get the START Treaty passed for some reason.
Yeah.
And the senators, regardless, Democrats or Republicans, they certainly should have known that, oh, by the way, here's this treaty that we want you to sign, but the Russians have been cheating on the one we've already signed with them. Probably the treaty would not have passed, even our Senate.
I mean, the president spoke today. He was asked about what Mitt Romney had said during the presidential debate, where he had it right that Russia was our top geopolitical foe. And he said a couple of things. I want you to hear some of what the president had to say today in The Hague.
If you don't represent women in politics in America as future president, who will?
That's
and here's the answer.
That's not the one. I could sum up what he said. Basically, he talked about the fact that what's done is done in Russia. Basically, he said, it's going to be hard to undo what Putin has done. He said Putin acted out of weakness, not out of strength, blah, 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 blah. But let me ask you at this point, obviously the president's strategy has been a failure from the reset through the sanctions, but what do you see Putin doing next? What do you think can be done next to prevent Putin from going any further? What would we have to do to show strength that we haven't showed?
Well, let's start with the sanctions. Let's impose some sanctions that actually have some teeth in them. If we want to start with visas, let's deny Russian diplomats from Russian diplomats from coming to the United States. Revoke their visas now. Let there be some consequences for invading other countries. The most important thing that we can do short-term and long-term is go after the monopoly the Russians have on natural gas and energy in the entire area. The Ukraine depends on Russia for its energy. It gets 60% of its natural gas from Russia. They use that as a political tool. I was even in the Ukraine in 2009 when the Russians turned off the gas for political reasons in the winter for 2 weeks. So they're held hostage. All of the former Soviet republics are. Energy is what Russia runs its economy on. Give them an alternative. We have an abundance of American natural gas. Let's sell them our natural gas. Let them know long-term you're going to be able to buy natural gas on a competitive basis, and that could be the first thing. We're going to help you energy-wise. It also helps the United States and give Eastern Europe, even the western part of Europe, a natural gas.
Absolutely,
so give them some alternatives. But sanctions immediately. The Russians are not through. They watched as we did basically nothing in the invasion of Georgia, where Russians took 1/3 of the country. The West said, "Oh, that's a bad thing." So Putin waits a few years, he invades the Crimea. I don't think he's through. I think he's going to go for more former Soviet republic areas, maybe the Ukraine, maybe Moldova will be next, or even the NATO ally Estonia.
Well, he's already indicated that there are Russians in Estonia who want help, and that was, of course, the reason for going into Ukraine, and that was, of course, Hitler's rationale behind many of his invasions. You got to be a little frightened. Now, first of all, in the context of a poll that came out today, 60-something% of the people said we have no business worrying about or getting involved in what Putin's doing with Ukraine. I doubt that the number would change significantly if, God forbid, it was Estonia, a NATO ally, which would require us and NATO to take action. Do you believe that that NATO would actually take military action against Russia to protect a NATO ally at this point in the Baltics?
I'm not so sure that we would. Our reputation worldwide is not good. People don't know where we stand. Our allies don't know where we stand, and our enemies certainly don't fear what we may do in repercussions. Now, I personally don't think that we should or need to be involved militarily in this issue at all at this point. We can do other things, like I have mentioned, show economic support for these countries before we get to talking about military.
Oh, no, I'm only talking about military further down the road as far as a NATO ally, yeah.
But I believe, Putin has, on his own, he has started Cold War II. United States probably doesn't realize that he has done this, but he has made all the overtures that he's not through retaking former Soviet republics and basically making those people be part of his regime in Russia. He wants to reestablish the old Soviet empire under a different name.
One more for you, Congressman. The president also said that as far as Russia goes and being a threat to us, he's more concerned with a nuclear bomb going off in Manhattan. I don't know that he needed to be so specific, and I hope it's not based on anything he knows and let slip in a Freudian manner, but sitting in Midtown Manhattan. But nonetheless, what do you make of that statement?
Well, I think we should be concerned about the Russians, not just on the nuclear capability, the cheating on the treaty, where they go ahead and we disarm to some extent. They don't. But their long-term goal is more world dominance, and they use any means necessary. Economic, they're building up their military, whether it's nuclear. This is also a signal to other nations. When we watch Putin and his aggression, what about the Chinese? They say, well, the United States really doesn't do a whole lot. Few sanctions for a few diplomats, that's it. We have our sights on Taiwan. And then there's Iran, of course, who still wants to be the big player in the Middle East and shows to them, well, maybe the U.S. isn't going to do anything about us and our nuclear program and our aggression in our sphere. So
it sets the tone, in other words, and I guess, unfortunately, it has set the tone. Congressman, great to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
My pleasure. Congressman Ted Poe, ladies and gentlemen, Republican from the great state of Texas. And interesting. And if a U.S. congressman is thinking like that he's not so sure that NATO will take up arms to defend an Estonia or another Baltic NATO ally member, then what's Putin thinking? We're coming back with the panel. Maybe we'll ask them on the Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax Television.
Breaking news and breaking hearts. Aww. This is the Steve Malzberg Show.
Tonight.